Hi, I'm Connor with LocReady. Welcome back to our internship interview series. Today I'm joined by Jessy Nguyen. Jessy, thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, Connor. My pleasure.
All right, just to get started, I was wondering if you could introduce yourself a little and tell us about your role at your internship.
Of course. So my name is Jessy Nguyen. I'm a second year student studying TLM, of course, and I'm also in the management track, which is kind of recently dissolved. Um, During my internship last summer, I was a localization intern for the localization and global experience team at LinkedIn.
Awesome, that sounds great. So when you first started looking for internships, I was wondering if you could describe your search process a little bit. How did you start looking for internships? When did you start applying? And then how did you eventually find out about the LinkedIn internship that you landed?
Of course. So I think my search process was pretty typical for the most part. When I was searching for internships, I made sure to set up job alerts on various websites like Glassdoor, Indeed, and of course, LinkedIn. I also created networks of peers who are also looking for internships where we would share kind of what we're finding and discuss any opportunities. And then I also browse localization specific websites or social media profiles that really focus on posting these job opportunities. I began looking for internships in probably the later half of fall semester of my first year, but it continued on through the first half of my spring semester of my first year. So really don't be discouraged if things don't work out in fall because it spans a pretty long duration. I ended up finding out about the LinkedIn internship from a friend who works in Silicon Valley as a recruiter. She knew I was looking for an internship related to localization, and so she sent it my way. And it really just goes to show, networking is important.
Mm. That sounds great. And I know you gave that advice to set up job alerts, and that saved me a lot of time. I did that this semester. That was really helpful. So I appreciate that advice. Um, and then in your resume, is there any particular parts of that that you really highlighted?
So I think I didn't highlight anything in particular, but I always make sure to cater my resume to the job description and requirements of the job that I'm applying for. So for the LinkedIn internship in particular, they had a pretty abstract job description. So I made sure to really showcase my ability to be independent and proactive. And so I highlighted my ability to drive projects or initiatives on my own without too much guidance or supervision.
Okay, that sounds great. And then if you're allowed to share sort of, were there any assessments or how many rounds of interviews were there? Or what was that hiring process like after you submitted your resume?
So my situation was a bit unique in that, when I was applying, that's when the shutdowns and the pandemic started. So it was a little bit of a pivot for the company as well.
Mm.
But the process was two rounds, where it was a phone screen with the recruiter and then a virtual panel interview with the hiring manager and some members of the team. There weren't any assessments, but there were a few situational questions that really required me to think of a solution to like a theoretical scenario.
Mm. And I'm assuming you probably can't share those scenarios with us.
They probably would change, but it's just kind of like the generic things like, what would you do if you were handling a program related to this? Or,
Mm.
those kinds of things that luckily the knowledge at MIS will most likely prepare you for.
Cool. Well, that leads into my next question. Sort of, you landed the internship. I'm sure that felt great. So, what was your first day like? Did you feel well prepared by your classes at Miss to handle the tasks that they gave you?
So again, it was kind of unique in that they ended up like LinkedIn ended up pivoting to a virtual, fully remote internship. So my first day was a little bit lackluster. I didn't receive my laptop yet, so I ended up just joining some team meetings, and then that was pretty much it.
Mm.
But once I actually started, I really began to appreciate that like that general knowledge that really Ms. gives you about the localization industry, because I was able to meet with team members, discuss their work, and understand, and then even kind of recommend or give them a fresh perspective on kind of the work that they've been doing for a while.
That's great then. That's good news for all of us. Um, so, what sort of skills are have you found were important in your day-to-day roles at your internship? Um, what did you have to learn while you're on the job? What skills were you able to cultivate beforehand, be it through the JET program or TA positions or whatever you had before?
So I would say the most important skills for the internship were kind of the soft skills. So being able to communicate and also stay proactive. So when you're working in a really large company, especially remotely, it's vital that you can communicate and connect with team members, even through a remote setting, right? So I planned a lot of one-on-ones. I tried to at my most actually discuss and really get to know the people that I was working with. I also worked in a lot of ambiguity. So keeping that proactive mindset where you actually go out to find work and you actually like delve deeper into the things that you're interested in really paid off because that's kind of how you find work and develop your skills. In terms of preparation, I definitely did a lot of just general research regarding kind of the processes and the business that happens at LinkedIn to understand kind of maybe potential localization issues that they would run into, or kind of if there's anything to watch out for once they start.
Hmm. In terms of that sort of reaching out to build those connections with people you work with, you said you set up a lot of one-on-ones. Were those just you're just chatting over video, or did you have like a game sort of set up, or sort of what did those look like?
It varied per person. A lot of it was just kind of like I'll message them through like, our chatting tool. I'll just be like, hey, I'd like to, schedule an informational interview. I'd just like to get to know you more. And so usually it's either 15 to 30 minutes. And we start off with just some general questions because I don't really know anyone, right?
Mm.
So asking them about their personal lives, kind of how they got into localization, or maybe how they got into the field that they're working on. And then of course it starts like that, and maybe I can ask more about work things, but I try to keep it really about the person to
Mm.
establish that relationship.
That's cool. That's cool that people are willing to sort of communicate. That seems like a great working environment. Um, so in terms of that working environment, sort of what are the localization processes like at LinkedIn? And what is sort of the work-life balance and the corporate culture like, to the extent that you can share?
Of course. So I can't share too much about the processes, but I can definitely talk about the work-life balance and the company culture.
Mm.
So LinkedIn is really well known throughout the tech world for really caring about their work and their employees. And even during my 3-month internship, I felt that everyone at LinkedIn, from my teammates to the CEO, really embodied the company values. In terms of work-life balance, LinkedIn is really good about this because they don't want you to work too much to where you burn out. They really care about employee burnout.
Mm.
For example, twice a year, LinkedIn offices shut down for 5 days. So the whole office shuts down, and it's 5 days and everyone gets paid. But this is mainly for employees to really recharge and refresh. And interns even get to partake in this during the summer. So, I just had a week where I was able to go and just relax, even though I was during my internship. In general, I was able to really comfortably balance my workload thanks to kind of guidance from my manager and mentors who made sure I wasn't being overwhelmed by the work.
Mm. And I know that for some of these sort of more tech-heavy companies, they might communicate via Slack or Teams. Were you getting sort of pinged a lot at nighttime, or when work was done, were you done, or? Um,
So it's a little bit, it varies per person because I was
mm.
working with some teams in Asia and some teams in Europe. So I wasn't getting messages from my team specifically, but from our vendors and things like that, I would get a couple pings here and there, but there was no expectation to respond right away. It was when you start working, you can respond.
Well, that sounds fantastic. That's really good. I know that's a concern that I have, so that's good to hear. So after the end of your internship, did you maintain contact with LinkedIn? I saw that it seems like you're working for them in a contractor role, so it seems like things have gone pretty successfully then. If you could sort of talk about how things ended and how you proceeded from there.
Of course. So after my internship ended, I still tried to maintain contact with my team. Luckily, they had a kind of a contract position open for just a few works project at an ad hoc basis. I've messaged them really occasionally just to kind of catch up with them because I made these relationships with my coworkers. And so I wanted to make sure that I would maintain them. And also, you know, if anything comes down in the future, I'd love to know about it.
Mm.
So I definitely recommend people to message and keep in contact with former coworkers just because it's really how you make yourself memorable and it's how you make an impact with them. Because I feel like a lot of people they work with end up just kind of disappearing from their radar. So it makes a really big impact when you actually reach out to them.
And when you're reaching out, are you sort of asking about projects, or is it just kind of like, hey, how's it going? Sort of more casual, or just kind of a
I
mix, I'm
really,
assuming.
oh yeah, I really try to just focus on that casual conversation because I would like that to think that my actual work
Mm.
would kind of invite them to offer me projects if I was fit for them.
Mm.
But I tried to make sure that it's about the relationship and kind of about them because, especially during the remote situation, everyone is really dealing with a lot, and work can also be a lot because it's just hard to balance. And so I tried to give them an outlet to just talk about, how things are going outside of that.
Mm. That's cool. It seems like you're really always putting people first, and that seems like it's really paid off. So sort of your final thoughts. How would you sum up your overall experience with LinkedIn? Do you feel like it's prepared you now for graduation, which is coming up pretty soon?
So I would say overall, it was an amazing experience, even though it was remote and things pivoted and, certain things were always different just because it's online. But I really got to apply the things that I learned at Miz to real world problems. And that was something that I really wanted to do because the more you learn, the more you feel like you can do something, but then there's just not the opportunity. And so the internship was where I really got to apply those things. And also, I made good friends during my 3 months there. So it was overall really good.
Hmm. That's great. And then just sort of a last question. Um, for all of us that are now sort of in the middle of that internship application process, is there anything that you would tell us or tell yourself? Anything you wish you could have done differently or knew at the time? Any advice for people like me and other students that are applying for internships at this moment?
So for me in particular, the one thing I really wish I knew is just I wish I had the knowledge that I do now in regards to program management or vendor management and like the more specifics of localization processes.
Mhm.
And that's just related to my internship. But I think for anyone looking now, my main advice would be three things. One is to apply fast or apply early. So make sure you're actually looking out and kind of ready to apply when things show up that you're interested in. The second thing is do your research. So, don't just apply blindly for these jobs and then, not be able to speak to the company values and kind of why you want to work for those companies. So make sure you look up their websites, really read about them and do your research thoroughly. And the last thing is to stay resilient. So internships, of course, everyone is searching for them and there's going to be a lot of rejection. But the main thing is to know that it'll all really work out as long as you continue to try and you don't give up.
Oh, that's so inspirational. So apply fast, apply early, do your research, be resilient, be prepared for that rejection. Thank you so much for joining us, Jessy. I know I learned a lot from this interview, so I hope other people will too. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.